this session, I want to talk about how coaching helps build someone's resilience. Now, the reality is we live in very critical times. We seem to spend our time finding fault and judging things, be it a critical review of a product, a critical review of a restaurant, a critical review of a film. And, added on top of that, we're living in even increased pressured times. The pressure on people in their workspaces or what's expected of them in a relationship is really putting a lot of excess amount of stress into just living daily lives. Now, in nature, there's no straight line, and it's the same in people's careers, in their sports performance, in relationships. And every time you read any of these brilliant books about famous people, they've all had ups and downs. And so setbacks are absolutely a part of growth. And we need to learn, how do we get up upon being pushed down, upon being dragged backwards, and get up and move on again? So some things I'll do in coaching. Well, look, one of the first things that we're doing in coaching is just being there for the person. Just being alongside them, and particularly when we work in a more of a therapeutic setting, just listening and allowing a person to express what's going on for them is massively therapeutic. But let's dig into some of the more sort of forward-facing stuff that happens in coaching. The first thing is we've got to focus on what's the goal. What's the driving purpose? What's our North Star? Because if we can keep focusing on that, we don't focus so much on the hurdles that gets in the way. And then very often we've got to reframe what's gone on. Where there is a setback, rather than seeing it as oh my God, I failed, I'm no good. It's this is a test. This is how we learn. We learn more from failure than we ever learn from success. And I always encourage people to sort of, be aware of the curse of perfection. Actually good enough is probably the best place to work towards. And sure, there are certain things we do need to drive for a much higher level. But, to quote Salvador Dali, the famous Spanish painter and creative, who said, never chase for perfection, because it's so illusory and there's only one level of it. And actually, if that's making us feel we've failed, because if there's only 1 degree of success, there's 99 degrees of failure. And that's not a good place to build your resilience. So then we'll be looking at, what is our self-belief? How do we build that up? And I'll do work upon building circles of excellence, like reinforcing, anchoring, stanking, all of these examples that we have been successful with in our past. And I'll be looking at sort of, being internally referenced rather than externally. So not relying upon what the naysayers and other people say, but finding your truth and your direction from inside. And then working on what's our zones of control, realizing we're in control of that and we control the controllables, but we let go of the things that we can't control and we don't worry about that. Because they're as much out of our control as out of everyone else's control. And then we're going to look at what strategies, what are the ways, the places that you go to that you've used in the past to actually build your own resilience. So we don't necessarily need to find new stuff. We can do, but let's find what works for you. So some people will use exercise a lot. Some people do meditation and mindfulness. Whatever works for you in the past is more likely going to work for you in the future. Maybe we need to add some more stuff, but we shouldn't lose track of, we've already done this before. I always make the joke about, when you first started to learn to walk, you fell over a zillion times before you got working. So therefore, why do we think that actually anything else in life is going to be, going to come to us, in easy steps? And the last thing is to go back to the first point about what's your support network. Clearly, your coach, your therapist can be your partner, but very often we've got to negotiate with these people to make sure they're going to be there for us. And frankly, there are some people we know who basically are more drains for us, and we've got to sort of keep those to one side when we're feeling a little bit more vulnerable and move more towards those who we know are going to give us that support that we need to have.